Today, I have a story for you guys about this neighbor who was extremely rude, and honestly, he was just pure evil. Like the video for 69 years of good luck. Subscribe so I can hit my dream of 420 trillion subscribers. And yeah, without any further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. So for today's story, we're gonna call our subscriber, let's call him Tommy. Now, Tommy lived in a smaller neighborhood. He mostly kept to himself, but he also did have a love for playing the trumpet, and he was part of the high school marching band. Tommy lived with both of his parents and his little sister in this smaller little house that was part of a very nice community. Well, it was a very nice community despite one single thing. This one neighbor of theirs. Their neighbor, for the sake of the story, we're gonna call him Mr. Bartholomew Grackle. See, Mr. Grackle was an incredibly mean, bitter, and seemingly deranged man. Anytime any of the neighborhood kids would walk past his house, they would get this very big unsettling feeling. And Mr. Grackle would always be somewhere nearby, either looking out his window or just standing in his lawn. And he would have the most evil looking death stare and would just stare at the kids as they walked by. He would always be perfectly still, but his eyes would just trace them as they walked. It was very unsettling, and all of the kids in the neighborhood ended up giving him the nickname Evil Grackle. Now, all of the kids in the neighborhood, or most of them, knew about Evil Grackle. However, most of the kids never had any true interactions with him. None of the kids except for Tommy. See, Tommy was next door neighbors with Mr. Grackle, so he had plenty of interactions with him, and none of them were positive. The first trouble that he ran into was whenever he was just a kid. He was in like first or second grade, and he was playing with a soccer ball in his yard. Tommy was kicking the soccer ball against his fence and then trying to get it up in the air and then volley it and keep it in the air. And that's whenever he accidentally knocked the soccer ball into his neighbor's yard. Tommy at this point had never met his neighbor or even seen him, but he still had that weird eerie feeling around his house. Like something about his house was just kind of unnerving. So he was kind of nervous to go up to the door and ask for his ball, but that was his lucky soccer ball, and also he had nothing else to do at the time, so he kind of had to go and try to get the soccer ball. Now, at first, like I said, he wanted to ask because the ball had rolled away all the way into his backyard, and he didn't want to just go into this guy's backyard and take the ball. But he was too scared to go and interact with his neighbor because, like I said, he was scared of the place. So Tommy rather laid against his fence and kind of scooted around to the other side of it. So now he was on Mr. Grackle's side of the fence, and while holding onto the fence with his back pushed up against it, he started moving down further into Mr. Grackle's backyard. Eventually, Tommy saw the soccer ball. It was in some of the shrubs just over a little hill in Mr. Grackle's backyard. So Tommy quickly got off of the fence and ran and tried to grab the soccer ball. And just as the ball was basically in his reach, he heard someone screaming at him. Now, Tommy says that this wasn't just like an ordinary, "Hey, what are you doing?" It was like a full-blown scream. He was telling Tommy that he had to get off of his property immediately or else, quote-unquote, bad things would happen. Tommy says that that soccer ball still to this day is sitting in his backyard. He never went back and tried to get it again, and that was his first interaction with his crazy neighbor. It wasn't the last, however. In fact, it was just the start. So as I told you guys at the start, Tommy was a trumpet player for the marching band, and one day he was practicing one of his songs in his house before a big marching band competition. Tommy was trying really hard to hit this one high note on his trumpet, and he was having a pretty difficult time trying to get it, and just as he finally hit it, he heard a big bang on his window. He quickly stopped playing, of course, and turned around and saw what was going on, and that's when there was another bang, but only this time Tommy saw what had happened. There was a little rock thrown at his window. As Tommy peered outside to see who threw the rock or what was going on, he saw his neighbor outside staring at him. Once the neighbor noticed that he got Tommy's attention, he screamed up to Tommy and said, "Your music is too loud. I'm working on my project and it's very distracting." And now Mr. Grackle was screaming this very loud, similarly to how he did with the soccer ball that day, because at the time Tommy had his window closed, and so his neighbor had to yell just that loud to have it so Tommy could hear him, which I just don't understand. If he has to yell that loud, how would the neighbor even be able to hear the trumpet at all, let alone hear the trumpet and think to himself, "Oh, that's too loud. I'm working on a project and it's distracting." Like, if you need that much quiet to the point where you can't even hear a trumpet through a closed window, maybe you should just go move to like a secluded area in the middle of nowhere, like some cabin in the woods or something. This other time, it was Tommy's birthday, and he had his birthday party in his backyard. He only had his close friends come over, and it was just like a little barbecue cookout that, you know, his family put together. So there was some family members there, and probably like 4 or 5 of his close friends, maybe like 12 or 13 people total. So, you know, nothing huge, just a little cookout. They had a little bit of music playing, and of course they were respectful. They didn't play it too loud. I mean, it's something that any person could do in their backyard and not be a disturbance, right? Well, to Mr. Grackle, they were so much of a disturbance that he decided to call the cops on them. Just after Tommy blew out his candles, the police came around the corner and they asked, "What's going on back here?" And that's whenever the parents came over and started talking to the police, and they explained to them that it was just a birthday party and that there was nothing crazy going on. And that's whenever the police went, "Well, that's funny. We heard reports that there was underage drinking and a big party going on in this backyard. Are you sure a bunch of people didn't just run away or something?" The parents were like, "What are you talking about? You know, this is ridiculous. No, there was no party. This is everyone who was here in the first place, and there was surely no underage drinking." I mean, this was Tommy's 12th birthday party. I think the last thing that a bunch of 12-year-olds are going to be doing at a little family/close friend birthday party in their parents' backyard with their parents there is drinking alcohol. Like, what? Like, there's no way that the cops even asked that. But I guess they did, because supposedly there was a report. That's whenever Tommy looked up at his neighbor's house and saw Mr. Grackle looking out of the window with a big smirk on his face. I mean, they already suspected that it was probably him, but at that point it was obvious that it was definitely him who had called the cops. There was also a bunch of other tiny little things, like Mr. Grackle would park his car purposefully on the sidewalk so that his friends couldn't skateboard or even just walk on the sidewalk, and they had to go and walk in the middle of a busy road. Yeah, so that was very nice of him. And then this last situation happened whenever Tommy's cat ended up running away. Tommy had opened up the door and his cat scooted on by and ran outside. And of course, the cat decided to go over into Mr. Grackle's yard. At this point, Tommy was a lot older than the last time he had to go into Mr. Grackle's backyard, so he wasn't as scared. And you know, he also had been living there for a while, so he kind of knew what was up about Mr. Grackle, but yet he was still kind of scared. You know, he had like the thought in the back of his head that something bad might happen, but he just wanted to make sure that his cat was okay and wanted to bring it inside as fast as possible. So he chased the cat and ran into the backyard of Mr. Grackle, and he luckily got his cat pretty easily, then started running back towards his house. And that's when, for the first time, Tommy noticed a little trap door beside Mr. Grackle's house. It was like dug into the ground, and it looked as if it could open up and then like there was something underneath it. He took a mental note of it, but he was too scared at first to inspect it, so he just ran back and got his cat back inside. But now he was sitting there just wondering what that was and what it led to. It looked really creepy, it was really weird, it was out of place, and he was very sure that it was not there last time he was in his backyard years ago. So an important detail, Mr. Grackle would often not leave his house either. He usually ordered like delivery for food. He would get a pizza or DoorDash something. Same with groceries, and he really was like a hermit. He just stayed in his house all day. There was only a few very select scenarios where he would leave his house. Now, Tommy didn't know the actual scenarios, but what he did know is that the longest he would be gone is around like 1 hour. But also, there were a few times where he was only gone for around like 10 minutes. So a few days go by, and Tommy was just waiting and waiting till the next time Mr. Grackle left his house, because he really wanted to see what was up with that weird storage room. At the same time, though, he was terrified because he didn't know what would happen if he got caught in Mr. Grackle's backyard again, especially if he got caught looking at stuff in Mr. Grackle's backyard, even more especially the storage unit thing that went underground that obviously Mr. Grackle probably didn't want him to see. Anyways, fear put aside, about a week later, a taxi shows up outside of Mr. Grackle's house, and Tommy from his window sees Mr. Grackle get inside. At this point, he starts making his way downstairs, and looking through his living room window, he watches the taxi drive away. He waits a second, so he knew for sure that the taxi was gone and Mr. Grackle wasn't around, and then he ran outside and sprinted over to the trap door in the ground. He lifted up on it, and it wasn't locked or anything, and what he saw was a set of stairs that just went down into pitch black darkness. Tommy pulled out his phone, turned on his flashlight, and walked on down. Now, I mean, this whole time he was terrified. He didn't know if he was going to come back at any point and just close the trap door on him and lock him down there, or if he was going to just get in trouble for being in his backyard in general. I mean, he just wanted to get in and out of there as fast as possible. He wanted to see what was up down there and then get out and leave. So he's running down the steps, and that's whenever he sees what this place is. It was just this big opened area with a bunch of cardboard boxes everywhere. And whenever Tommy opened up one of the cardboard boxes, he saw a bunch of these tiny little rubber ducks. Like, this box was full to the brim of rubber ducks. It was so bizarre, so odd. He really didn't know what was going on. So he opened up another box, and yet again, more rubber ducks. Turns out every single box in this storage room is just full of rubber ducks. Tommy closed the boxes back up, and he was trying to get out of there as fast as possible. He knew he didn't have too much time, but just as he started running towards the steps, the door slammed shut. At this moment, Tommy's heart dropped. He thought at this point it was basically game over. Mr. Grackle had just locked him inside of the storage place with rubber ducks. He didn't know what to do, and for a second he just sat there in dead silence until eventually he tried pushing on the door to see if it would open, and sure enough, it did. Tommy peeked out of the door to see if Mr. Grackle was anywhere to be found, and after the coast was clear, he made his way out and sprinted towards his house. Luckily, he made it back safely undetected, and I guess the wind just blew the door shut. But Tommy literally for a second thought that it was game over, that he was going to be locked up in like Mr. Grackle's dungeon with rubber ducks or whatever. But yeah, with a sense of relief, he was in his house and he was fine. But he left there more confused than he was before. Was this the project that Mr. Grackle was always working on? Was that the reason that he was always so defensive about his backyard area? Was that why he made sure like no kids ever came near his house? Like, is that actually what he cared so much about? The rubber ducks in his little storage room? I mean, like Tommy said, that storage room wasn't even there the first time he went in his backyard. So that means he built this whole entire trapdoor and storage area underground just to store boxes full of plastic duckies. Tommy pondered on the reason for this for many weeks. He told some of his friends about it, and they were all trying to come up with theories and reasons as to of why he might have all of them down there, until eventually they devised a plan to make their way back into the storage room and try to figure out something else, like another clue or something to go off of. So they told Tommy that next time Mr. Grackle left that he was to call them immediately, and they were going to bike on over, get there as fast as possible, and they were going to be on watch to make sure that Mr. Grackle wasn't going to be back and give him a notice if he was on his way back. And then Tommy, of course, was going to go down into the storage unit and try to find something other than a bunch of rubber ducks. So weeks and weeks go on by. It's probably been around 2 or 3 months by now, and Mr. Grackle has still been up to his usual ways. He's still been really mean, really creepy, and he hasn't left his house. But then one day, a random car pulled up, probably like one of his family members or something, and Tommy saw Mr. Grackle leave his house and enter the car. Right then and there, he called his friends, he told them what was going on, said that Mr. Grackle was not going to be home, and that they needed to come over right now so they can go figure this out. At this point, Tommy runs into Mr. Grackle's backyard and goes down into the storage room. At this time, his friends are on their way over right now so they can be on watch. They're probably like 2 or 3 minutes away, but he knew for sure that he had like 10 minutes minimum, so that's why he went down there on his own at first. He needed as much time in the storage unit as possible. So Tommy goes down the steps and he notices that there's probably like 3 times more boxes than there were last time, and he starts just opening up all the boxes, checking every single one, digging through it a little bit to see if there's anything in them, and literally every single one is still full of rubber ducks. There's a bunch of different kinds of ducks, different colors, ones with different logos, but there was nothing down there to go off of, nothing at all, until eventually Tommy pointed his flashlight at the ceiling and started looking around. And the ceiling was pretty low, by the way. He had to duck a little bit just to be in there, but the storage room was like very long and spacious that way, but height wise it was probably about like 5 or 6 feet tall. And right then is whenever he realizes that there is an orange envelope taped to the ceiling of the storage area. He jumps up and grabs it, and just as he's about to open it up to see what's inside, one of his friends yells down, "Mr. Grackle's home! Mr. Grackle's home! You gotta get out right now!" And he hears all of his friends start running away, and at this point he's in fight or flight mode. All the boxes were open, he had this envelope in his hand. He just ran out of there knowing that Mr. Grackle was just gonna have to know that someone was in his room. He took the envelope with him and ran for his freaking life. Right as he ran out of Mr. Grackle's yard, he passed the car that Mr. Grackle was in, and surely Tommy thought that he had seen him and that it was game over. But regardless, he just went right past the car, ran into his house, and up the stairs into his room, which is where all of his friends had planned to meet him, and that's where they were. So Tommy and his group of friends now are in the room, and Tommy reveals to them that he found an envelope. But then he also lets them know that it's probably game over because he left all of the boxes open and the trapdoor wide open as he was running out. They were all pretty scared at this point, but regardless, they opened up the envelope to see what was inside. There was a bunch of diagrams with like rubber ducks and like wires drawn from them, and it looked like diagrams trying to connect different ducks with each other. Very, very weird stuff. And then they flip open to the next page, and there's a log about all of his experiments. They read the experiments and revealed that Mr. Grackle believed that these rubber ducks possessed like some energy force or something, and that they could be harnessed to create infinite power. Literally absolute garbage, like none of it made any sense. Tommy had also pocketed one of the rubber ducks and he was showing it to them. They cut it open and looked inside of it and there was nothing in it. It was just your average rubber duck. So at this point, they had basically concluded that Mr. Grackle was absolutely insane, and now they were just sitting there waiting for God only knows what was going to happen once he realized that someone had been in his rubber duck storage area. Some time goes by, maybe an hour or two, and this whole time the kids are looking out their back window just waiting for Mr. Grackle to exit his back door, which he would do very often. He'd always be going between his backyard and his house. Eventually they saw the back door open, and that's whenever they closed the blinds on the window and started to hide because they didn't want Mr. Grackle to know that they were spying on him. A few seconds later, they hear a super loud scream. Mr. Grackle went, "Who touched my ducks?" It like echoed through the whole neighborhood. That's whenever Tommy heard a loud bang on his window, and he already knew at this point that it was Mr. Grackle throwing pebbles at his window once again. Only this time, Mr. Grackle was going to be throwing slightly bigger objects at Tommy's window. The next big bang on his window was not only a big bang, but it was a big crack. Mr. Grackle had shattered Tommy's window completely by throwing a gigantic rock at it. Mr. Grackle was screaming, saying, "I know this was you, Tommy. I know you were in my backyard. I know you saw my ducks. Where's my plans for the ducks, Tommy? Where's the paper? Where are my ducks? What did you do?" At the same time, Tommy heard the garage door opening, and it was his parents who had just come home. So he ran down there and told him what was going on, said that Mr. Grackle threw a rock at his window and broke it, and told them that Mr. Grackle was threatening to hurt them and all of this other crazy stuff. That's whenever the parents were like, "Okay, listen, we're calling the cops, all right? This dude is absolutely crazy," and that's what they did, and the cops eventually showed up, and at that point, Mr. Grackle was still screaming, he was still yelling, going on about how his duck warehouse was invaded, and he was just like, "My ducks, my ducks." Even as the police took him away in handcuffs, he was screaming for his ducks. It was at that point that Tommy told him everything, told the police officers that he had went into the storage unit, broke in, and was on Mr. Grackle's property whenever he shouldn't have been, and they told the police officers about all of the ducks and all this energy stuff. It was all really weird to the police officers as well. They were pretty puzzled, but also they were mad at Tommy for breaking into Mr. Grackle's backyard, and Tommy actually ended up getting in a little bit of trouble. He had to do community service hours for trespassing, but that was nothing compared to what happened to Mr. Grackle, who had threatened these kids and threw a brick at their window. So whenever the police were there, Tommy gave the papers about the ducks and the energy and stuff to his mom, which she then gave to the cops. And yeah, basically they said that Tommy was insane, and they sent him to a mental institute. Maybe he belonged there, probably he belonged there, but also there is just a chance that he was completely right about rubber ducks generating endless energy, and that the government took him away because he figured out something that they didn't want him to know. Regardless though, he has yet to return back to the neighborhood. But hey, that's just a theory, a Mr. Grackle theory. Thanks for watching.